Hi everyone, my name is Olivia and I'm a sophomore at Alma College and I'm studying elementary education and special education. The screencast is about learning disabilities. Learning disability is a term currently used to describe a group of neurological conditions that interfere with a person's learning. Under the LD umbrella, there are disorders that are related to listening, speaking, reading, reasoning, and mathematical calculation. For a history of learning disabilities, in the 1940s to the 1950s, medical research was limited to studying the functioning of brain-injured people. In 1963, the Association for Children with Learning Disabilities formed. In 1975, Congress passed Public Law 94-142, which was the education of all handicapped children. Um, In 1990, Congress passed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is IDEA, um, which was which extends or refines services to people with disabilities. And then in 1997, IDEA was reauthorized. Um, for leaders in learning disabilities, the look-say method of learning to read in the early 1940s resulted in a high degree of failure to acquire reading skills. Samuel Orton, Anna Gillingham, Bessie Stillman, Romalda Spalding, and Grace Fernald responded to the need by developing alternative methods to teach students who couldn't read by memorizing sight words. So Public Law 94-142 is the Education of All Handicapped Children Act. It was passed by Congress in 1975, and it guaranteed that each handicapped child aged from 3 to 21 would receive a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment possible. This also became known as the mainstreaming law. Section 504 is a Rights Act. It was designed to help students who might not qualify under the IDEA regulations. It defines 7 conditions that might make a child eligible for modifications of the program or to meet needs. Those 7 conditions are drug or alcohol dependency, ADD or ADHD, other health needs, communicable diseases, social maladjustments, a learning disability without a severe discrepancy, and the student has a disability but has been exited from special education. So some casual factors of an LD is or they include familial factors, difficult pregnancy, delivery, or prematurity, prenatal conditions, postnatal or birth trauma, or early childhood exposure to neurotoxins like lead. So an estimated 5 to 30% of the population has a learning disability. According to the U.S. Office of Education, 5 to 15% of the school population is identified as being LD. Data from 26 countries show that the incidence of dyslexia ranges from a low of 1% in Japan and China to a high of 33% in Venezuela. In the U.S., 20% or more of students have trouble reading. 3 to 8% of children in the U.S. have been diagnosed with ADHD, and approximately 1 in 150 children have autism, and 1 in 94 boys are diagnosed with autism. So primary characteristics of learning disabilities include perceptual deficits and phonological processing deficits. One indication of a learning disability is a perceptual deficit. Perceptual deficits occur because the brain misinterprets sensory information. 80% of students that are LD have problems reading. It appears that deficits in phonological processing underlie difficulties learning to read. Co-occurring conditions include attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, conduct disorder, and Tourette syndrome. ADHD co-occurs with an LD in approximately 1 out of every 3 students in special education services. Conduct disorder is sometimes a co-occurring condition with ADHD, and Tourette syndrome is frequently accompanied by ADHD and LD. So the least restrictive environment, or LRE, um, a special education personnel could come into the room and assist the child. Special educators could meet with the regular teacher in a collaborative or consultative mode to plan the child's program. The child could go to a resource room for part of the day. The child could be placed in an LD special day class for all or part of the day. So the brain, the central nervous system is responsible for learning. The frontal lobe deals with problem solving. The temporal lobe is responsible for hearing and language. The parietal lobe controls senses. The occipital lobe controls vision. And the cerebellum controls balance and coordination. Implications of brain injury. Um, Brain injuries may be caused by car accidents, falls, or sports accidents. Effects are they depend on location and the extent of the injury, the neurological maturity of the child, and the nature and extent of the efforts to retrain the brain. Early brain damage is one brain in one brain area may alter the neuroanatomy, function, and neurochemistry and growth patterns for the remaining brain systems. So autism is a neurological disorder that severely affects a child's development. Its primary symptoms show up in social development, especially with language and social interactions. And people with autism are not able to read emotions or facial expressions. They tend to focus on one single part of the face, like the mouth, and they can't read the entire face. ADHD is one of the few LDs that has a distinct link to an environmental toxin, which is lead. Symptoms are caused by the brain's inconsistent processing of sensory input, and disorganized behavior and the ability to focus is affected in a person who has ADHD. Biochemical influences of LDs. Um, ADHD and TS are both believed to be caused by biochemical irregularities. Medications like Ritalin, Siler, or Adderall seem to help people with ADHD sustain attention for longer periods and inhibit undesirable behaviors. Improvement is reported in approximately 75% of people who are on medications. Biochemical irregularities can be influenced by pharmaceuticals, substances we eat, and things we drink. Memory. Learning disabled students may have deficits in one or more of these areas, which are being able to attend to stimuli, encode information about that stimuli, integrate and store data in memory, and being able to retrieve the data as they are needed. Studies done at Brandeis University point to a protein called the memory protein, or the memory molecule, which influences memory in rats. Memories are stored in the hippocampus in the brain, and the chemical messages communicated in the hippocampus change when memory is stored. And quieter classrooms benefit all students. Sometimes teachers play white music, which is music like an instrumental music or music that doesn't have any words. And then retrieval refers to the mental operations we go through to extract a given piece of information from memory. Metacognition refers to the knowledge and control of individuals that have their own thinking and learning. They have over their own thinking and learning. It's the ability to think about what one is thinking about. Young children seldom use metacognition strategies to learn because they think concretely rather than abstractly. And teachers can use think alouds to help their students think more abstractly. And those include note taking, verbal self mediation, mnemonics, and mapping or graphic organizers. Phonological processing problems are delayed speech is one of the first signs of a phonological processing problem. Phonologically based reading disabilities are characterized by difficulties acquiring alphabetic or phonetic reading strategies. This may cause children to have trouble consistently spelling words correctly. This occurs in the left temporal area of the brain, and children with phonological processing problems are able to learn to read when given the right instructions, and problems may manifest themselves in other ways beyond phonics and reading instruction. So, timeline of laws for learning disabilities. Section 504 Civil Rights Act was passed in 1973. The Education for All Handicapped Children was passed in 1975. IDEA was passed in 1990, and then it was again passed in 2000, and then the No Child Left Behind Act was passed in 2000. So IDEA versus Section 504. The purpose of IDEA is a federal statute to ensure appropriate services for disabled children. All school children who fall into the 13 disabilities that IDEA covers are who is what IDEA covers. Funding provides additional funding for eligible students. The Department of Education enforces this. IDEA requires written notice for parent and informed parent consent, which is written, a full comprehensive evaluation by multidisciplinary team. It provides for independent evaluation at a public expense if a parent disagrees with school evaluation. And re-evaluation is not required for a change of placement, and a change is an IEP team review decision. The purpose of Section 504 is a civil rights law to protect the rights of individuals with handicaps in programs that receive federal funding. All school-age children qualified as handicapped or who have or have had a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity is covered. This does not provide additional funding. The U.S. Office of Civil Rights enforces this. It requires a notice to parents, and it suggested that it be written, but no formal evaluation is needed. Decisions made by a group of knowledgeable professionals, and it does not provide for an independent evaluation, and reevaluation is required for a significant change in placement. For both of these acts, documentation, both laws dictate that there should be thorough documentation, and both laws require impartial hearings for parents or guardians who disagree with the identification, evaluation, and placement of a student. So parental rights. Parents have the right to require confidential treatment for their children's records, review and inspect records, have copies of all records and documentation that the school has on file. They can release records to non-school personnel with the permission of the school. They have the right to be notified 10 days in advance of any meeting about their child. They can request assessments for their children, and they can refuse services or placements in special education for their kids. And so the Learning Disabilities Association has information for parents about the types of educational legislation in place. They have sample form letters to send to schools and information about different types of learning disabilities. Another organization, which is Reading Rockets, produced a series of videos, and parents can watch online and spell out the advocacy process and how to be successful. And a legal group called Rights Law puts on training seminars, offers advocacy information sheets online, and has a number of books out that list the legal issues involved in advocating for children with learning disabilities.